Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I am joined by Chris McAway. And first off the bat, Chris, thank you for covering on the bulletin today. I hope you enjoyed it with Yogi, Paddy and James.
Guys make it easy, don't they?
Did you get through it without banning anybody?
Just about. I was tempted with a few. I'm not going to lie. I'm tempted at the moment with a few.
It's all good-natured, good, clean fun. We are in the midst of a Champions League evening at a Celtic Park that Brendan Rodgers has been describing in relation to the power of a night like tonight, the power of the energy that comes from the stands. Chris, I love all that chat. I believe that. I think the Celtic support creates an energy that can actually resonate into the legs of the players. I'm telling you, I do think the longer this goes on, I do think it was one of the biggest aspects of the lockdown season, the fact that the Celtic support wasn't in the ground, and that positive energy that we will see during the animalistic Champions League theme tune tonight, to quote Alistair Johnston, that is something that I think can give the energy to the players initially, but it's also about having those high demands, isn't it? Whereby if something's not going well, you know all about it as well.
You do, and I've heard people talking about it at various clubs and various levels, how the fans can be your extra man in the park, but they can also, if things aren't going well, the fans can really, they can let you know it. I think you really always want to do what you can to keep them on side. I mean, I've felt it. I've been to Celtic Park on European nights. The one that I always remember back to in terms of atmosphere was, I think, the Spartak Moscow one, where it was a penalty shootout and Boric makes the save at the end. And the energy that was in the stadium at that point for a penalty shootout, I don't think I've experienced it since. And unfortunately, I've not been able to attend too many matches in recent years, but that has stuck with me over years, and I really think when a manager talks about the power of Celtic Park, and now with the lights, with the atmosphere, with the way the stadium looks, and I think just the way the fans are feeling at the moment, it really resonates onto the park, and I think you see it. I mean, we talk about that COVID season. I mean, there was so many things wrong with that season, and I don't think it's something we need to labour now. It's done. It's history. Let the mob over the other side lord over us with that as long as they can. I think everybody can see what kind of season that was. But now the position our club's in, the success we're having on the park, how well the club are situated off the park in terms of finance, maybe need a little bit of revision of the marketing strategies we've touched on a few times this week. But by and large, we're in a great position as a club. And this new European format is really working, I think, in our favour. But I also think we shouldn't put the club's progression just down to that. We have taken great strides this season. A lot of that is on the manager, the team, the way they're performing and they're responding to the manager, the backing of the manager and the team with investment from behind the scenes. And as you've rightly mentioned, I think a huge part of any success our club has comes from the stands. It comes from the terraces. Guys that get up, we spoke about today, guys that get up at 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning in Ireland, travel over, pile onto a bus, bleary-eyed, but full of good cheer and good spirits, and get across for games like this. And then, everybody that invests their time and their money into the club. Honestly, I cannot praise our fan base enough. And listen, it's not even just the guys in the stadium, it's everybody that's sitting at home watching our channel, following on with what the club do. And, we've got, for me, the absolute best support in the world. And I love it when a manager acknowledges that.
It does. And, when I hear it, I don't think, it's like back in the day, you would sign a player who had no connection whatsoever to the football club. And they would start kissing the badge and all that. And, that became a thing, the badge kissers. When Brendan speaks about the fan base, he knows what he's talking about. His own brother is one of these guys that comes over from Ireland and actually watches the game. And members of his family have done it for years. He knows what it means to this fan base. And tonight is just one of those nights, Chris, that he came back for. We've been talking about this all the way through the season now. For example, if you were to look at the fixtures, and I'm going to bring them up again from that much used graphic from the very beginning, the Champions League graphic, if I haven't deleted it, there it is. If we were looking at these fixtures and we were looking at the first 4, right, and you were splitting this up into like 2 halves, and you looked at that first 4 fixtures compared to the second 4, I would maybe look at the first four and think, on paper, those were a trickier set of fixtures than the second half that we're about to commence this evening. Would you agree with that, Chris? Looking at it as it is there.
Yes, I think so. And I think we've put ourselves in a much better position than we could have anticipated. Yeah, look, I mean, like the Dortmund game was what it was. We reality check maybe in terms of the level that we still have to try and aspire to. But every other match, I think we've shown that this is a level that we can not only compete at, but can actually, we can actually go and really show that we're almost progressing beyond that level. I mean, look, I'm cautiously optimistic about tonight. I'll say that. I'm not taking things for granted. I don't think there's any easy games at this level, and I think every team's got the capability to hurt you. But I think you're right. I think, we've navigated what many of us would have thought would have been the trickiest set of fixtures so far. And I think you look at Dortmund, you look at Atalanta as two main candidates, Leipzig as well. You're maybe looking at that thinking, God, we could maybe compete, get a draw, or maybe snatch a win there. Well, by God, we did more than that. And I think you're looking forward now. The one that I would say I'm most concerned about, and actually, by the time we play them, it may not be a factor, let's be honest, is Villa. But now, given what we've done in this tournament, I'm not sure we need to fear anyone. I think we have to be careful. We have to show respect where it's due. I think we have to play our game and make sure our fundamentals are right. But I don't think we have to fear, much from these teams. I think we've got the capability, and we've demonstrated the capability to go and compete.
Yeah, when I look at it now, it's easy with hindsight, but I think the first four fixtures, and we could go back to the bulletins that we did at the time, Chris. My big view on this was anything you take from Dortmund or Atalanta would be a bonus, anything. And obviously, we did take a point from Atalanta, and it was a great display, a defensive display. And then at home, I was looking at Bratislava thinking, yeah, we can have that. Leipzig, I think I predicted a draw. So for me, we're a wee bit ahead of the schedule that I had envisaged for our campaign in Champions League. And the point I'm making is we're sitting here with 7 points. If we can replicate that in the second half of this campaign, then you really are in there. You're really in the mix in relation to where you're going to end up in the table. But again, I think that Dynamo Zagreb were kind of written off, and they are only a point behind Celtic as we go into tonight's game. I think that they, after a humbling first game, have come right back into it, and it's not going to be as easy as we kind of thought. So I'm looking at tonight, I'm looking at the Young Boys game, and I'm thinking, try and keep that fortress Celtic Park. I mean, imagine getting a clean sweep at home. Phenomenal. It would be phenomenal, right? And I'm not getting ahead of myself. And at that point, if you do get a single point from the last two games away from home, then you're really in a great position. But let's have a look at the team. We need to have a look at the team. And it's really, I think, as most people predicted, other than maybe than the midfield, some people were looking for Bernardo to get a start. So we're kicking off with Schmeichel, Johnston, Carter Vickers, Trusty and Taylor. McGregor, Engels and Hatate with Kuhn, Maida and Kulo up top. On the bench, Sinisalo, Scales, Palmer returns to the bench. Ida, Baye, Yang, McCowan, Nawrocki, Bernardo, Forrest, Ralston and Welsh. I would say my only concern here, right, and I don't think it will be necessary, because if there's an injury to one of the centre-halves, then Scales is a man to step in. There's a couple of guys on that bench who don't have enough game time for me. So if you had to call on, for example, Nawrocki or Welsh, they've not got the game time, and that concerns me a wee bit, Chris. But there's nothing really that Brendan can do about that, if you think about it, because he's trying to rotate Scales, Carter Vickers and Trusty. There's only so much you can do in terms of game time. That's my only concern with this. Obviously, when you look at the wingers, Palmer comes back in. We've got three wingers on the bench, loads of choice and variety on there. You've got Ida, who, I said during the week there, he is on as good form, if you're looking at the minutes, as he was last season. Maybe he's not scored the bigger goals that he did last season. When you're looking at guys like McCowan, for example, who has never let us down, Bernardo, who can really change the dynamic of the midfield, it's a strong bench, isn't it?
It is, and it's something we were crying out for the past couple of seasons. I agree with your point on Nawrocki and Welsh. I think, they're very much the embodiment of last-ditch backup players. We would have to be particularly unlucky to see injuries to both of our centre-backs tonight. I think, we can possibly absorb, although I hope it doesn't happen, we can absorb the loss of one of those players because we have Scales coming in who's been playing regular, knows the team, knows the system, and has the trust of the manager. So I think it's great that we've got at least one, I guess you would say, established centre back on the park, and that's not to denigrate the other two boys. I mean, I think if called upon, they'll have the backing of the manager and the backing of the fans. But ideally, you want someone that's been playing and has got a bit of tenure in the team. Wing on the wings. I mean, we've spoken about it all season. I mean, there's no doubt Maeda and Kuhn are your absolute number one choice. We all keep hoping for Palma to come in and show some of what he showed early part of his career, maybe start to look like he can contribute into this team and this system. So I'll never write any player off. I just want him to take the opportunity if it does present itself. Yang made an impressive cameo in his Champions League performance in the last game. It was something we all enjoyed watching and we'd like to see him build on. So maybe he'll get another opportunity tonight and hopefully he can take that. But I think midfield is where we're absolutely our strongest, right? I mean, you're looking at McCowan, who we're all keen to see what he can do. It's very, very early in his Celtic career, albeit he's well established in his senior football career. I think he'll play a part throughout this season. I just think it's, we have to recognise that he has made a big step up, and for me, he's not done anything to disgrace himself. I think he's actually performed really, really well, and I'd like to see him get more opportunities going forward. But you've got Bernardo on the bench there as well, and I would have no problems with Bernardo coming in to replace at any point any of the midfield three. I think he's a reliable, safe pair of hands, and to be honest, that's all you can ask for. Up top, two great options that give you different options. We've got Kyogo, who gives you the movement, the intelligence, and of course the finishing. Anida, who will be hopefully high on confidence after his 2 goals at the weekend, and he gives you that physical presence that maybe Kyogo doesn't have. He's a bit more direct. Certainly, his first touch can either be brilliant or it can be horrendous. He's one of those type of players, but he's still putting up decent numbers this season. Somebody pointed out in the chat earlier is that his actually stats are close to what we saw from him last season. Maybe the eye test is not quite the same, but I just think we've got quality and depth at the moment, with maybe the exception long term at left back, because we don't know what the situation is there. Taylor's the old hand. He's a tried and tested. Okay, we know there's a bit of fragility there in certain situations, but he's a player that has been a huge part of the success here. I don't know what the situation is there. You pointed to it earlier this week. He was in the team, he was established, he was doing well, and then suddenly, dropped out amid rumours that maybe he was going back to Barca in January. Given what we've seen of him, I'd have no problem with him coming in. I just don't know what the reason why is that he's not getting more starts and more appearances.
I've got a theory.
Let's see the theory.
Will I give you my left back theory?
Let's see the left back theory.
So during the week we were talking about Ida's numbers being as good as last season, but when you throw in Scottish Cup final winners and all the rest of it, obviously the eye test will say he had a better season last year. The left back theory I've got is it's something that's in the post. It's a problematic issue that we're probably looking at. I would expect us to look at. I actually see it as a priority position. Yeah. Whether or not we sort it out in January, I don't know. I think Brendan Rodgers wants to keep Greg Taylor. Right now, long term, a bit like Liam Scales, you want to keep the player, but you're thinking to yourself, I could get that upgrade. I think that's why Trusty came in at centre half. Scales has proven himself absolutely. He's had man of the match performances in the Champions League. He's scored at this level. He scored for his country. What a success story. But we still went out and bought Trusty, Chris, right? Now, I think the scenario is the same at left back. Baye is a short-term option for backup, because I do believe that Brendan Rodgers has his eye on a left back, and I'm not going to get into who that might be. But Greg Taylor, I think Brendan wants to stay at the club, and I think what he's saying by playing him time and time again, this is my man. And you know what? It's Brendan Rodgers has said to the board, I want to keep Greg Taylor, and it's now over to the money man and Michael Nicholson to get the deal done. Whether or not that deal gets done because of the demands of the player is another question. But I think it's actually a statement by Rodgers to say, Taylor's my man at left back. Until I bring in my upgrade, my trusty, if you like, Taylor's my man, I want to keep him at the football club. Now, everybody knows his contract ends in the summer. He can start talking to new teams on the 1st of January. I'm going to ask you the question, Chris. If you think of a 3-tier system in terms of the wage structure at Celtic Park, and we've spoken to a lot of people in terms of agents and also players who tell you that Celtic operate a 3-tier system. You've got the players just coming through, or maybe players that we have bought, let's say from Norway, for example, or coming in from countries where they're getting an improvement in their wages, but they're going right into that bottom tier. We spoke to Jackie McNamara, for example. He was always in the middle tier, even when he captained the club. He was never the highest earner. And in that top tier, you're going to have players like in recent years, Tommy Rogic was in there, and Nir Bichon was in that top tier. That type of player had, through experience and longevity, built himself up. We also brought in big name players, big money signings who went straight into that. Your captain's in there. James A. Forrest is in there. So, and in the middle, obviously, is a section where I think you're going up a ratchet system, or you come in at that entry level. Yeah. Where's Greg Taylor? Is he one of your top earners? Is he in the middle bracket? Is he in the bottom bracket?
It's a difficult one. If I was to give you a very simple answer, I would put him in the top end of the middle tier. I'd put him in the top end of the middle tier.
A bit like us in the Champions League.
A little bit, yeah, maybe a little bit like that. But I think, for me to be in the top tier, there's 3 criteria that I would expect to come into play. One would be it's inherently big wages because of the big transfer fee. You brought in a marquee signing, right? So an Engels, for example, or one of your big signings. I think that's an obvious criteria, and sometimes it's not necessarily based on performances. It's just the fact that that's how you got the player to the club, right? So I think that's one element. I don't think Greg Taylor would fit that profile. The other one is your obvious importance to the club. I mean, I think you look at Callum McGregor, he should absolutely be there. It's bizarre when you think Jackie McNamara as captain wasn't in that tier, but Callum McGregor for me would be in there. And I think you're looking at players of critical importance to the team, i.e. the kind of spine of the team. So Callum McGregor, maybe a Carter Vickers, your goalkeeper, obviously.
Probably Schmeichel because there was no transfer fee.
Absolutely. And maybe your top performing player over the past couple of years. So maybe a Kyogo, for example. Maybe Matt O'Reilly would have been in there had he stayed with the club, for example. And the third criteria would be tenure. Someone who's given their devoted their kind of career to the club, in a meaningful way, not a Scott Bain type way, I should point out, but very much a James Forrest type player, someone who has achieved a lot of success, has contributed meaningfully to that success over a sustained period of years, has done it all with the club, and has shown that degree of loyalty to the club. And so that's the 3 criteria I would say that puts you in that top tier. Greg Taylor, for me, he's not quite hit the tenure yet, even though he's been a big part of the success. I think, given his performances, and I'll stress this is just my opinion, I think he's a pretty important part of the team, but I don't think he's a critical part. I think he's replaceable. I think we could bring in alternative options. Baye coming in earlier in the season has kind of proven that. If Brendan Rodgers was to bring in another left back of requisite quality to either push Greg Taylor or possibly, succeed Greg Taylor, I think that's possible. And he wasn't brought in for big money. He was somebody that we brought in. I don't think it took him time to establish himself. He was very much a player that was a work in progress, maybe not a natural left back. I think he was more familiar in midfield when we signed him. But he's taking nothing away from Greg Taylor. He's done fantastically with his career at Celtic, and grateful to have him at the club. But top end's middle tier for me, to answer your question.
Right, and I think that's where we are. I think that's what you would call the impasse, whereby his agent is saying, my player is in the top tier. And obviously the club are now at loggerheads. I think that's where we are in relation to the left-back position. What do you think in the comments section? Should he be up there? Should he be in the same kind of cast as Cameron Carter-Vickers, Callum McGregor, James A. Forrest even, Arnie Engels? Should Taylor be in that bracket? And if not, it could well be that he actually leaves the football club. But I do believe Brendan Rodgers is playing him to say, this is my man, I want to keep him at the football club. Let's get some of the comments coming in. We've got the Urban Culture. Always an absolute pleasure to see you popping up on the YouTube. Kyogo comes to life in these games, and he does. I mean, he is the epitome of a big game player, Chris. Often he comes into the games having been criticised or even written off. I've seen him getting written off last season on a number of occasions, but he's a big-time player, a big-game player, isn't he?
Look at his past performances; they've proved it. He's done it against every team domestically, and he's proven he can compete in Europe and make a real strong contribution. I think Kyogo's a fabulous player. I think he's one of the most intelligent players I've seen in terms of movement. I think he is a very, very hard worker. I think he's got a great attitude. There's something that summed up Kyogo for me. And I don't know if you saw his post-match interview after the Hearts game. And he's there with his translator, and he's given all the boilerplate answers for his, through his translator, and it's excellent. You can just see him; he's very professional. Then right at the end of the interview, he gives a little yeah, and he just gets it right. He just gets what playing for Celtic is all about, and I think he embodies everything we love about a player at Celtic. He really does, and I'm delighted he's still at the club. I think he will just continue to play well. I think he must be a delightful player to have in the team because he works for every single player in the team. He makes himself available. He's got a great attitude. The work ethic of him, and I believe a number of his international teammates as well, is absolutely fantastic. It's second to none. I've heard stories about what they do, after the matches and after training. And I mean, like, everybody knows I'm biased. I've got two pictures of the guy behind me here, but yeah, I think he's a phenomenal player, and he is absolutely a big name player. And that's no disrespect to any of the other strikers at the club. I just think Kyogo gives you something that is so rare today, and it's just that hard-working, forward, high-pressing player. He's fantastic. Yep,
yes,
absolutely,
absolutely
lovely guy.
Yep, and I go against my better judgment when it comes to footballers and social media because Kyogo is so, honestly, just go and watch it. Go and look at the wee guy. He's absolutely brilliant. So wholesome. The content.
Yeah.
It's wholesome. James Devine, I'm really surprised Bernardo hasn't got a start. Yes, I think there's a good argument to suggest, James, that he could have fitted into tonight's team. But at the same time, Mickey comes in to say, Engels has been quietly excellent in Europe. I think he has been very effective, kind of under the radar. You look at the Kungo against Leipzig and the movement of Bernardo to create the space actually for Kun, and he laid the ball off to him as well. He's doing things like that, I think, slightly under the radar. He's got 3 assists in 4 games in the Champions League this season, right?
Yeah.
He's heading towards the De Bruyne levels of Belgian footballers' assists in a Champions League campaign. He's up there, he's up there with the Mulgrews of this world, who's had 3 assists in a Champions League campaign. So Engels is being quietly effective. I agree with that. And Joseph McGonigal, well done to the young team. Let's follow their lead. For anyone who didn't hear, yes. So earlier on today, they were at the City Stadium, formerly known as Lesser Hampden. It's the home of Queen's Park. Beautiful wee stadium, by the way. For anyone who's not yet visited it since it was refashioned, go and visit it. It's very, very nice. And Celtic beat Club Brugge, and I'm going to get back to the name in a second, after who else? Daniel Cummins scored in the 9th minute. Now, obviously, we're talking about strikers, we're talking about youth development. Daniel Cummins, right, in terms of goals scored this season, be that domestically or in the UEFA Youth League, has scored 22 goals in 20 games. That's now 5 goals in 5 games in Europe for young Cummins. What do you make of that, Chris?
Those are some numbers to be putting up. I mean, even at that level, there's something about a striker who can just find the back of the net. I think, we just spoke about Kyogo and all the other great attributes he's got and what he brings to the game. His movement, his pace, his vision, all that kind of stuff. And it's fantastic. And that's why I think Kyogo's world class. But what you've got here in Daniel Cummins, you've got a young guy who, for every other element to his game, he knows where the back of the net is. And fundamentally, that is the number one priority for a striker, right? If he has got the ability to put the ball in the back of the net consistently, and I mean, it's beyond consistent, isn't it? It's more goals than games at the moment, and that is a fantastic record. Now, look, it's a big step up to play into senior football. We know that. It seems to be an incredibly hard path at our club in particular, for maybe a multitude of reasons. Some we know, some we don't know. I would love to see a player like Daniel Cummins, even if it's just in some of the domestic games where we are dominant, get him on, give him the opportunity. I genuinely think, and listen, I'm not a coach, so I apologise to any coaches out there that feel free to tell me I'm talking nonsense. I sometimes think you don't really assess a player fully until you see him in that environment, in that first team environment, see how he reacts to the pressure, see how he reacts to the situation, see how he reacts to the way the senior team plays, and see if he's capable of making a grade. There's only so much you can see on a training field or at a B team level or a youth team level. Give them the opportunity. Right? If it doesn't make it, it doesn't make it. You've given them the chance. But give them the opportunity. We are the most dominant club in Scottish football. Surely we can craft opportunities for these young guys domestically. Surely.
Well, Chris, at today's game at the City Stadium, there were 9 English football representatives at the game watching, I would suggest, players like Daniel Cummings, whose contract runs out at the same time as Greg Taylor's. He is free to speak to other clubs on the 1st of January. So I think that was a wee warning sign. Will he make the bench against Ross County? Let's hope so. Let's hope he makes the bench against Ross County. Ridiculizer, the reason I brought this one up, Chris, is because Joe Hart said something really interesting in co-coms a few weeks back. CCV is a concern, says Ridiculizer. He's not been the same man since his injury last season, definitely missing a yard. Joe Hart spoke about how we need to manage Carter Vickers when he comes back from injury, and he needs a number of games to get back to that standard that he set. So I'm not disagreeing with Ridiculizer. What I am saying is he's probably in that process of building himself right back up to peak CCV.
I think you can see it in some of his performances. I agree. I think at the start of the season, he looked a bit ropey when he came back. Like he was managing his fitness at the same time trying to get his sharpness back. What I've noticed in recent games, I mean, Carter Vickers not the quickest player, right? But his positioning is fantastic sometimes. His defensive positioning, his defensive awareness, his ability to read a situation, I think, is great. And I think that's started to come back in recent games. You're starting to see that he, and maybe the partnership with Trusty's helping that because they're obviously on their natural side, they're playing off each other well, they're international teammates, so they know they've got that pre-existing relationship. But I think, you see the way Carter Vickers moves when Trusty goes to attack the ball. And Carter Vickers moves into a very effective covering position. That's what I've observed anyway. People might say I'm talking rubbish again, but that's the way I've interpreted it. And I think Carter Vickers brings that to the table. He brings that level of assurance. It's like, you go make the challenge, and listen, if it gets away from you, I'm here. And that's where I think Carter Vickers' biggest strength is. It doesn't need to be the flashy defender. It doesn't need to be the guy to carry the ball forward, although he's got that in his locker as well. But he's just got something about him where he just seems to know where to be at the right time. And I think that's starting to come back. So yeah, I would agree. I think he's taking his time. He's a player that we need to manage in terms of his fitness, particularly given his importance to the team. But when he's on it, I don't think that anyone can touch him in that back line. I think he's absolutely phenomenal. And I think, the advantage, again, we talk about it, we've got skills on the bench. We do have the ability to manage a player like Carter Vickers. And indeed, many other players in the team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Kieran is getting a bit excited. The nerves are kicking in. Come on, you boys in green. And just before I get a prediction from Chris, I received an email from one of our listeners, Paul Hare. Thanks for getting in touch. There is quite a simple explanation in relation to the pronunciation. That's a lot of Asians of Bruges. In English, when referring to the city and by extension the football club, Bruges, i.e. the French name for the city, is invariably used. This also explains the title of the film, with Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell. The city itself, however, is in the West Flanders region of Belgium, where the official language is Flemish, basically Dutch. So the locals will refer to the team as Brugge. So there you go.
Interesting.
You know what? It's an education being on Acsom, and a lot of the good information is coming from the viewers and the listeners. We have 50 seconds before we leave. Chris McElwain, give me a prediction.
3-1 the Hoops.
3-1 Celtic. Let's see what the viewers are saying before we actually get to the game. 3-0 to Celtic, says Chris. He is bold. He's going for it tonight. That will put us on 10 points, Chris. I'm not seeing many other people coming in. There we go. Ian Roy, teams are ready. Here we go. I'm going 3-1 us. I like a bit of that. Have I made a prediction already? Because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking 1-0. I'm thinking 1-0.
Ultimately, it's about 3 points tonight, right? That's what we want. I mean, I'll take a messy 1-0, even if I have to do the Jim Orr thing and hide behind about 15 couches before while I'm watching it. But
let's get them hiding behind the couch. Let's get them hiding behind the couch.
Absolutely.
The Champions League couchers. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. Really excited to have a wee look at this first half. Catch us again in 45 minutes. All that's left for me to say thank you once again, Chris McElwain, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Pleasure.